What's up, everybody? Welcome to The Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Check out who's in the building. It's Earl the Pearl Monroe. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
So let's talk about your life. Let's talk hoops. Take me all the way back, because clearly for you, you've had a love and a passion for basketball for a very long time. So what were those early days like? When did you first pick up a basketball, and when did you know that you'd kind of be stuck to this basketball for a long time?
Well, it's been a long time, obviously. Actually, I didn't start getting basketball in my blood until I was about 14 years old. And I got walking down the hall in junior high school, and the coach comes up and asks if I play basketball. Of course, I'm 6'3" at the time.
That's a tall 14-year-old.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I said, no, sir. He said, well, come down to the gym this afternoon and let me check you out and see, what you can do. I went down and, I guess I kind of fell in love with it then. I obviously wasn't very good. Went in and played, and guys were just doing me wrong, as I say. And after a while, my mother, asked me, well, Earl, what's wrong? And I say, oh, these guys are dogging me out. I go, they laugh at me, so forth and so on. So she proceeded to give me this little spiral notebook and say, all those guys that are doing that to you, just jot their name down. And as you get better, you could scratch those names off. And that really got me, interested in trying to really be good in basketball.
How long did it take to scratch all those names off?
A couple years.
A couple years?
Yeah, but, at least I was able to scratch them all off.
So at what point in high school do you start thinking to yourself, maybe I can go to college, I'm starting to get a little good here?
Well, actually, I didn't play varsity until the second half of my junior year.
Wow.
Yeah, and of course, I thought I should have been on varsity before that.
Waiting for your shot, yeah. Like, coach, come on.
Right. But when I went up, I was a starter. So I started the next half of that season, and then the next season I led the city in scoring. And at that point, I decided that, hey, I'm going to try out for the ABL, which is one of those basketball leagues back in those days, and not go to college. So I decided to wait. And in September of the next year, they decided to fold the league. So that kind of left me out there, and I decided then, well, maybe I'll go to college now. And I went to Temple Prep to see if, in fact, I can get the grades and whatnot to go to college. That worked out well because I was playing against all the top people and teams from the Big Five, the Penns, the Villanovas, the St. Joe's, and all. And I was killing those guys. So I'm saying, well, it let me know where I was in the game of basketball at that time. During that year, I decided to just drop out of school. And I did drop out, and I started working at a knitting mill. And making $1.15 an hour. Now, if you miss a day, you bring home about $29 a week. That got me very interested in going to school.
You're like, I could probably use an education.
Right. So a guy came up to me and asked me if I wanted to go to Winston-Salem State. I hadn't heard of it, and the first time I said no. And later on, about 3 or 4 months later, he came back and asked me if I wanted to go to Winston-Salem. And I said, well, I'll go if my friend could go with me. And
looking out, I like it.
Well, it's a guy who went through junior high school, and eventually college.
That's your guy, right?
So that's my guy. And he came back and said, okay, let's, we could work that out. So we got on the train, went down to Winston-Salem. Coach had never seen us because back in those days, the coaches looked for the guys who used to play for them in different cities to send them back names of guys who they thought might be good for them. And so we went down there thinking we were on scholarship. And we eventually went down there to try out for the team.
Wow.
And eventually made the team, and we had to pay our first year of college tuition. And, the rest is history.
It's really remarkable to hear that story, because you think about college basketball today, and there are guys going through the same decision. Do I go to school? Do I go overseas? Do I play in the G League? And for you, going to school was really important, not only for life, but for basketball. So what was the most important lesson that you learned while you were in college?
Most important lesson I learned was probably to stay at it, because after my freshman year, which I didn't play as much as I thought I should have played, and back in those
Seems to be
days,
a consistent theme.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in those days, you could play freshman ball. You know, you didn't play freshman ball; you could play varsity right away. So, whenever the team got down, they called me in. I shoot them up, and once we get up, I come out of the game. So after the season, I say, Coach, I've got some offers from, like Temple or NYU. I think I'm going to go back up. He said, why? I said, well, I play a little bit. I put you up, you take me out. It's inconsistent. He said, well, listen, you wait right here. I'm going to make a phone call. So he goes in his office, and about 10 minutes later, he calls me in and he says, somebody wants to speak to you on the phone. And I said, okay. I answered the phone. I said, hello? Ma?
Like, oh boy.
Okay, 3 more years.
Yep, I'm staying here. I hear you, Bob.
Yeah, so staying with it, which is the most important thing, and believing in what you're doing. I mean, thing in a nutshell that I'm most proud of, aside from everything else that's going on, is that I graduated and graduated on time. So, and me and my guy Steve.
There you go. You guys kept it going. You stayed at it, and that was such an important time in your life, because you get your degree, you end up going to the NBA, and Rookie of the Year right off the bat. So, how did things click for you in year one once you got to the league?
Well, I pretty much knew what I could do, because in Philadelphia, you played against a lot of the pros anyway, in summer times and things of that nature.
So who were some of the guys at that point that you were running up against?
Well, Walt Hazzard, Wally Jones, Wilt Chamberlain, Chink Scott, a lot of guys that played pro ball that, were in and out of Philadelphia. So I knew pretty much what I could do, but obviously it was a different step. Fortunately, in Winston-Salem, we played an up-tempo type of game, which helped me to score 40 points a game.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Yeah. So coming into the league, I was, content to start out on the bench. And once they traded Don Ohl, who was there as a starting guard, I moved up, and from there it was like straight up. I was scoring anyway. They were trying to find a way where could we take Don, get Don to go so that Earl could get a chance to get out and play. And in those days too, it was interesting, because I could have been one of the big assist leaders in the game. But I was throwing passes like behind my back, over my shoulders, at guys, and the balls were hitting them in the hand or the face or the chest.
Yeah, like, I'm just going to take control of myself.
Right.
Here.
So Gene Schutz comes up, who was the coach at the time at the Bullets, and says, Earl, these are some great passes, but these guys are not really used to that. So I'd rather for you to shoot. And so I say, Gene, I can do that.
You don't have to tell me twice. So you're starting to get your shots, things are going well, and then there becomes a certain point where you want a different situation, a different team. So when does that happen, and why did you ultimately want to check out a different spot?
Well, going to, I guess, my 4th year, we had talked about, switching teams. My agent at the time, Larry Fleischer, who was head of the Players Association, said, well, Earl wants to go to another situation. Well, Earl didn't really want to go to another situation, because Earl had his own team.
Right.
But there were things that were said in the papers, and I just said, okay, I've got to go.
So you just rolled with it?
So I rolled with it. And so Larry called me one day and said, Earl, don't go to the game tonight. So I didn't go to the game. And I was nowhere to be found for the next week. And so I've kind of forced them to trade me. And I had gone to Indiana, and I thought that I would go sign out there. And they were a pretty good team. And then Larry called me and said, you know, I have a better situation for you with the New York Knicks. Well, I said, oh no, not the Knicks. I mean, we played against the Knicks. They are a hated enemy. I can't go. He said, well, listen, think about it. And I went back to Philadelphia and talked to my mom and talked to my mentor, Sonny Hill, there. And the consensus was this. I decided that I could play under any circumstances, you know, because I'm a ball player. I can play under these different, and I'll go, and I'll make it work.
I think you made it work.
and that's pretty much how I got to, you know, I had given Baltimore and, you know, 3 teams that I wanted to be traded to. I wanted to be traded to either Philadelphia, which was home, Chicago, or L.A. You know, 3, you know,
big
cities.
Yeah.
You know, but I wound up in the biggest city.
So take me back to those early days in New York, because like you said, that's your bitter rival, and all of a sudden you're plopped down in the middle of that team. So what were those first couple weeks and months like once you were a Knick?
They were interesting. You know, coming to New York, first of all, just, you know, the fan adulation was just unbelievable, and I didn't really understand it at first because I had been an enemy for so long. But coming over, man, and getting the crowd, the cheers and things of that nature just made me feel, you know, really good. Dave Busher and Bill Bradley came and they, you know, welcomed me, and I had played against Bill in the Baker League, and we had one of the storied games against each other in the Baker League. So it was great to come in and get those guys, you know, approval for being here. The big fella, Willis, came up, and, you know, all that. Everything was good. So when I went in to talk to Red about, you know, about what the situation is going to be, Red Holzman, the coach, I told Red, I said, well, Red, you know, Dick Barnett is your starter. I understand that. I don't want to put any pressure. I'll come off the bench. Don't worry about it. I'll make my way. And I think, you know, from that, I think I got his, you know, kind of adulation in the sense that I didn't want to create any kind of problem. And the fact that having been and done what I've done, and still want to come in and want to come off the bench was a big thing. So that's what I did. I came off the bench into the latter part of the season. One of the reasons, you know, when I came into the Garden was that I needed bone spur operations. And so I said, well, you know, Red, I also need a bone spur operation. And he said, well, Earl, you know, we just traded for you. I don't think we could, you know, let you just go and get an operation right now. You're going to have to play through it and get it in the off season. I said, wow, okay, I could do that, I guess. So I was hobbled a lot during that first, you know, rest of the year here, but had surgery in the off season and came back and ready for the next season.
I think there's a lot of really interesting points to that, because first of all, you humbled yourself to be willing to come off the bench, which that took a lot of credit on your part, because, you know, you'd wanted to play, you were in a good situation with Baltimore, and obviously you were sacrificing. And then also with the foot injury, I mean, guys today, if they were traded, that would be taken care of. But it was just a different time where guys were playing through a lot more. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure for you, when you look at the NBA today, it's just so much different than what it was for you at that point.
Yeah, well, you know, you talk about yesterday and today. When I got to the Knicks in my first game, I think I took maybe 6 or 7 shots. When Melo came to the Knicks, he took 30 shots.
You're like, really, Melo?
Right. I said to myself, when I looked at the stat sheet that night, I said, 30 shots.
I get that in like 5 games, probably, you know? It's crazy. I mean, for somebody like you that played through that time in the NBA and seeing where it's at now, whether it's the contracts or the style of play or just, you know, everything involved, I mean, I'm sure it's pretty mind-boggling for you to take a look at today's game.
Yeah, well, it's good though, because you've seen the game grow over the course of the years. I mean, we've seen it grow from, before I got here, there was, I came in with 12 teams in the league, and there was a quota system.
Yeah.
By that was 67, by 1979, 80, then there were 85% black in the league. And then it moved off from there. And then right after that, when David Stern took over, then there was the marketing of the players, and that made the league grow. And it just continued to grow, continued to grow, continued to grow.
Yeah, and being a players' league has always been such a huge thing. And even looking at basketball love story, you look throughout time, focusing on the players has always been critical, whether it's the 1960 All-Star game with, protesting for benefits, or somebody like you in your situation, forcing a trade to go to where you want to go and playing with a guy like Clyde and playing with Bradley. Like, those are things that were happening in the 70s and the 80s that are still happening today. So it's cool to see it all pieced together.
Yeah, well, back in those days it was frowned upon. Right now it's not.
It's encouraged.
It's encouraged. But it's encouraged now because, guys have gone on and they've done what they needed to do. You take a look at KD. He played.
Yeah.
For OKC, he played his contract out, went someplace else and won a championship.
Yeah, got his rings, got his MVPs.
Same thing with LeBron.
Yeah.
You do your obligation, and then you have an option to either stay or go.
Right.
I mean, that's you've played for that, and that's what you should be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, your situation, you could have been in Baltimore your whole career, but you wanted something more. You got to the Knicks, and then 73 happens, and you got your championship, and you have that memory forever.
True that. I talked to those guys in Baltimore. They were mad at me because
I'm sure they were.
Because they say, "Oh man, we could have just had a dynasty here or something." Well, they traded for Elvin Hayes right after that, and they eventually got their championship in '78.
Right.
But it would have been interesting to be able to get there and be a part of that as well. I still consider Baltimore, really, I have a place in my heart for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So when you guys do win in '73, everybody says it. Winning in New York, there's nothing like it. What was the most satisfying part of that championship experience? I mean, you've talked about it forever, but when you look back on it now, what still sticks out?
Little things. Little things like the Busher getting hurt the last game before in L.A., and then we going on and finally winning that. The fact that I was so tired after that series. I looked at my roommate, because we had roommates back then, Dean Meminger, and I said, "Dean, it's over. Let's go get room service."
Yeah, because you're laying it all on the line.
Yeah, I mean, we had played them, the year before as well, and we lost to them, and we felt like to the man that we should have played better and that we could have won that, and we were hoping that we could get back to that same situation, that they would win in the West and we would win in the East. So LA wins in the West, we win in the East finally, and it happens again, and it just reversed.
That was a great series, and an important couple of years in your career too. And I'm sure, given from where you were as a 14-year-old kid in Philadelphia to where you got to that championship moment, it must have been, incredibly special to win with those guys in New York.
Well, those guys in New York were special. I mean, I've had the good fortune of playing with great players, from Wes Unseld in Baltimore, Gus Johnson, Jack Marin, Fred Carter, Kevin Lockery, those guys. And then coming to a team with Dick Barnett, Frazier, Willis Reed, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, and so forth and so on. Jerry Lucas.
Yeah.
I mean,
you guys had a really complete team.
We had a great team. I mean, 2 Rhodes Scholars on this team with Jerry Lucas, and
you're not getting that anywhere else in the history of the league.
Exactly. And so, I even to this day, the great thing about having played for those 2 teams, that I'm still friends with those guys that I played with, and it's almost like we played yesterday when we see each other. Because of the camaraderie and whatnot that you build up, and the stay-to-itness that you have with each other over the course of the years. So totally. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I love how you guys still have that connection. And, you and Clyde in those days, that backcourt was lethal. And I feel like that backcourt is overlooked sometimes in the best backcourts of all time. So what made you guys so special?
Well, I think what made us special is that we both had our own teams, but we were able to more or less come together, and because of the respect that we have for each other, make that situation work. It's a little different when you look at the Splash Brothers, which I mean, these guys shoot the lights out, you know. I mean, but you know, I don't know if Thompson could have run his own team. I mean, you know, Curry is running that team. And you look at Curry and now and you know, the kind of heights that he's gotten to, and you look at it at that team and say, well, he still might not be the best player on that team.
Which is crazy to say.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a special team, and it's great to watch them.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned the Warriors, and, you know, thinking about the documentary, it puts the Warriors in perspective. It puts your generation in perspective. How cool was it for you to see, you know, 20 hours of some of the greatest stories put together in one place?
Well, it's it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
I mean, I've watched part of it, and I'm like, there's a ton more to get to here.
It's an awful. It covers politics. It covers racism. It covers teams in the Olympics. It covers
Signature
great
moves.
teams,
Yeah.
signature moves. I mean, whatever you could think about in terms of basketball, and it's not done in a chronological,
Right.
you know, which is what I like about
Yeah,
it,
I think that's
because
great.
it grabs you in different areas. It talks about the women's games, you know, and gives you, you know, expectations of that and whatnot, and how that came about. I just think that it's a great thing for people who are basketball junkies to see things that they might even know about, but see it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's what Dan has done in this series and whatnot. He's made it so that you've got 62 mini stories
Right.
in this whole thing, and you know, having worked with him before in Black Magic, I knew the kind of you know, work that was going to be done.
Super talented guy.
Absolutely. And the fact that, you know, we've got some great editors, we've got some other great producers in this, researchers. I mean, this is a ton of work that's been done over the last 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And to bring this out now, and with the kind of response that we've gotten from this, it's been really overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, people have loved it. And I think another interesting thing is guys in the league are watching it too. You know, like CJ McCollum is telling Donovan Mitchell, like, you got to check out this documentary. And I mean, that must be fascinating for you as a former player looking back, like, wow, these guys are really respecting history and they can actually learn something from checking this out.
Yeah, because for the most part, when you think about the guys that are in the league now, most of them don't know history of the
Right.
game.
Yeah.
You know, and what this gives them is a slight history of the game. It doesn't go all the way back, you know, to the Mikan,
Right.
you know, the way Mikan, you know, influenced the game and how Wilt influenced the game per se. But it gives you a general perspective as to how the game was brought to you. You know, when you think about the part with Maurice Stokes,
Yeah.
and what happened to him,
Unbelievable story, yeah.
and that whole scenario, and Jack Twyman coming to be his guardian, who was a teammate who really, they weren't really friends,
Yeah, but a situation puts them together.
it puts them together.
Best one I've seen so far. I love that one.
Absolutely. And I knew that story,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was told from a different perspective. It was told from the perspective of Jack Twyman
Right.
accepting the Hall of Fame award for Maurice Stokes. And I was at that ceremony. And so it gave me a different perspective as to that whole scenario and how it unfolded. And then, of course, that manifests itself into how the NBA Players Association was formed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it gives you a thread to run through, but also gives you the individual stories as well.
Yeah, no, it's been remarkable and definitely fun to check out. So, you know, thinking about your life, we were talking a little bit off camera, your life after basketball, I think it's pretty interesting because you tapped into the entertainment world and, you know, guys like LeBron and KD are doing that now, but you were doing that in the 80s, you know, you had your office 3 blocks away from here. So what were those, you know, initial years like after you stopped playing basketball, and, you know, how did you branch out into something more besides hoops?
Well, it was interesting because when I got to New York, the November that I got to New York, I met 2 guys, the Alim twins. And these guys had just come back from Europe from Jimi Hendrix's funeral.
Oh, wow.
They were teenagers in his last band. I met them, I signed them, and now I was in the music business.
You had your record label, boom, right there.
Right there. So I used to do promotion and promotion when I went out on the road. I'd go to Cincinnati, I'd go to whatever other city it was. I'd call the DJ, tell them we got records and whatnot. And I do this because I was working for a group from Polygram. And I did that throughout, and then eventually I met some guys. Actually, a guy that I played with, Barry Arms, in Baltimore, and another guy by the name of Dick Scott, who was with Motown. We formed a company, and we started doing stuff here while I was playing. So after I was, finished playing, it just automatically clicked to just stay in the entertainment business. So I did an off-Broadway musical called Bones, and we traveled that around. And, I did it, for my own record label, and it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, it was a lot like playing basketball, in the studio late, in the clubs late, and coming out, with something that you felt was going to be really good.
So what was the coolest part of that experience in New York City?
Well, the coolest part about that is that I knew everybody. I got to know everybody.
So who were some of the people you crossed paths with?
Oh, wow. Well, Frankie Crocker was my big guy. I mean, he was at BLS, and his network spanned everywhere. One of the great things that I have is that there was a book called Hitman that was out. It was about the record business, and my company is listed in that book as one of the up-and-coming young companies in there. Of course, they hit a ceiling, though. But I was at when Madonna her first night at Studio 54.
Wow.
One of my artists was performing that night as well. And so I saw her first performance at 54. And, in New York, there are a lot of firsts.
Right.
And so, you just, locked into all those things if you're out there.
So were you telling people, check out Madonna, make sure you keep your eye on her? Did you know at that point? Did you see something a little special in her?
I don't know. At that point, I don't know if I did or not. But, because I'm only focusing basically on my guy. And, but certainly G. Keith Alexander, who was her manager, who was also a radio DJ as well, he was a guy that I knew was, pretty well as well here.
That's awesome. So let's talk Knickerbockers basketball. David Fizdale's in there as coach. Porzingis is hurt. Scott Perry's the GM. How are we feeling about the Knicks going forward?
Well, I think it's a work in progress, obviously. You've got a new coach, you got a new system, you've got pretty much a lot of new players.
Yeah.
And that's going to take, some time to kind of gel. I think they're going in the right direction in terms of starting out, kind of at the bottom and trying to build on that. Not so much at the bottom when you've got a guy like Porzingis that is in the wings, but obviously they've got to sign him next year, but seemingly he's bought into that. I think they compete well. They compete, hard. And I think that if that continues to happen, we got something to really build on and look forward to.
I think the Garden is just dying for a team like yours from back in the day, just waiting. The Garden is a special place. And like you said, those fans, they're rabid.
Oh, yeah.
They're really ready for something like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, where else would you have fans like this and not having won a championship in 50 years?
People probably would be coming.
So, but, it's... you go to the Madison Square Garden because it's the greatest arena in the world, but at the same time, you still want to see good basketball. You still want the teams to compete. And these guys, I think, at least at the beginning of the season, that they've done, pretty much what people thought they would do. And, might even more so at this point. But if they continue to compete like this, I think they'll win the hearts of these all the fans here. Yeah,
I hear you. All right, Earl, so when people check out the documentary, I mean, it's a huge investment in time, but it's definitely worth the time. What do you want people to think about as they finish up this doc and walk away from it?
Well, first of all, they're going to be amazed, and they're going to be taken aback because of the fact that it's not only informative, it's done so well. And I think, the doc speaks for itself. I mean, you look at it, and every episode that you see, you come away saying, wow. And the wow factor is what you want. And I think that everybody looks at it, gives it that wow factor.
This guy always brought the wow factor. That's Earl the Pro Monroe. Earl,
Thank you.
An absolute pleasure.
Okay, appreciate it.
Much. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.